good evening to you. Trust that you've had yourself a wonderful day, and welcome to this week's edition of Bottomline East Africa, where we bring you the latest news from across the region and attempt to put them into perspective. Later on in the bulletin, we shall be speaking to our special correspondent Alex Chamwada, who has just returned from Bujumbura in Burundi to speak about the state of that country. We know that for the past 1 year, it has been in civil strife. Welcome to the program. Now, the head of the UN's refugee agency, Filippo Grandi, is in Kenya for talks on controversial government plans to close down the world's largest refugee camp, Dadaab. The Kenyan government announced last month that it wants to close down the camp in the east of the country, which is home to more than 340,000 Somali refugees, by the end of November. It claims that some of the attacks carried out in the country were planned there. Despite intense pressure from the international community to reverse that decision, President Uhuru Kenyatta maintains that all refugees in Kenya will be returned home, as the country is facing a huge economic and security burden. This year alone, 8,000 refugees in Dadaab have voluntarily returned to Somalia, but tens of thousands others say that they are too afraid to go back due to security concerns. Now, details from Thursday's Al-Shabaab attack on an Ethiopian military base in Somalia remain scanty. Both Ethiopian and AMISOM officials have not been able to confirm a casualty figure. Earlier reports had indicated that between 40 to 60 Ethiopian soldiers died in that attack in central Somalia. Ethiopian ambassador to Kenya, Dina Mufti, told Worldview earlier this morning that 5 Al-Shabaab commanders and more than 400 Al-Shabaab soldiers had been killed by AMISOM troops.
Stick to the information by the AMISOM,
Yes.
and this is an attack that had been attempted by an Al-Shabaab on the Ethiopian AMISOM forces in Somalia.
Yes.
It was totally foiled, and there were heavy casualties that the terrorist forces have been met with.
Yes.
By now, I'm of the information that 475 terrorist groups were killed, and a huge number of them were also caught, were captured, and of which there were 5 leaders, among which one of them is a foreigner.
Okay.
In fact, now the operation has continued. The Al-Shabaab, as had been said, is on the run, and the Ethiopian forces, the AMISOM forces, together with the Somali defense forces, are
In pursuit.
in the hot pursuit right now.
Yeah.
And it is totally a fabrication and a lie on the part of the terrorist groups to claim that number of casualties.
Okay.
However, we'll verify and come out with the exact number of the people that had been in that casualties.
Okay.
Serious. Actually, it's not the first time that Al-Shabaab has been trying to attack the Ethiopian bases in Somalia.
Yes.
There had been repeated attacks, but they were not successful at any of them, like the current attack as well. They have been foiled, and in fact, what has happened right now is actually, it doesn't show the strength of Al-Shabaab as such. What it shows is Al-Shabaab is on the run, as you know it very well. It has lost a big swath of the big chunk of the territory in Somalia.
Yes.
And therefore, for Al-Shabaab, it is a matter of making a statement for survival. It's an attempt to show the rest of the world that they are still in operation. Otherwise Al-Shabaab is on the run. The peace and the stability of Somalia and other neighboring countries is interrelated with our peace and stability. And we will be there as long as we are needed.
Yes.
We'll be there as long as Somalia gets stable and peaceful. Now Somalia is getting relatively stable. They're heading for elections. And once that end is met, definitely we have no purpose to be there. We are there.
Thank you, Najma, for that report. Now, it's just over 1 year since Burundi, spiraled into a civil strife. This was after President Pierre Nkurunziza announced his bid for a third term. It is a strife that has seen up to 450 people dead and more than 200,000 people just fleeing to seek refuge in other countries, mostly Rwanda and Tanzania. And now joining us in studio is our special correspondent, Alex Chamwada, who has just returned from Bujumbura. Alex, karibu sana.
Asante sana.
Right. How was your visit to Burundi? How was it like, your experience there?
Okay, first it was, I went to Burundi together with my cameraman Humphrey Odhiambo, so it was a two-man crew, and our stay was okay. We were there for about a week. We were able to film day and night, so we didn't see any roads that have been, any roadblocks. We didn't hear any incident or maybe a gunshot, except for one day there was tension over the arrest of some students who had defaced the pictures of the current president, Pierre Nkurunziza. And the critics were saying it was not necessary. Other than that, we traveled around. We went to some market 40 kilometers away from Bujumbura city, and we had nyama choma at a restaurant owned by a Kenyan. I met some business people, both local and foreign. There is Kenya Commercial Bank operating in Bujumbura. There is Kenya Airways flies there 14 times a week. Yes, they are saying it was bad. Yeah, 14.
So even you going around there, how was it like? The picture that we have from the reports from Bujumbura is that tension is high, perhaps movement is not even, normal. How is it like? Has normalcy returned to Bujumbura?
Yeah, security is relative, but from our experience, 1 week, it was relatively okay, and there's no tension. People are going on with their own businesses. Kenya Commercial Bank is operating Kenya Airways, but they are saying it was bad a year ago, even up to December, and some Kenyans even had run away, but they are back. The only thing, Sharon, is we tried to, have interviews with ordinary people, but it's not easy to get an interview from an ordinary Burundian at this time. Why? One person told us off camera that you don't know what will happen to you if you say all is normal, there is peace. You don't know what will happen to you if you say there is no peace. So they've sort of taken a backseat as a wait and see attitude. Other than that,
a bit fearful.
Yeah, a bit fearful. But we talked to some ministers who are saying, that is just because of what happened last year. But normalcy is returning to the city.
All right. And this normalcy, can you say it's even being felt in terms of trade and businesses going on as usual? You say Kenya Airways is flying 14 times a week?
Yeah, two times a day.
Right.
Yeah, 2 times. So that's 14
so that's
actually. So because it's from Monday to Sunday. Yeah, what we saw, people are going on. There are other Kenyans who are doing businesses like the Nyama Choma Kenyan we met, and there are Kenyans who are even teachers. We met about 10 teachers at a school called King School. 10 teachers, and the head teacher is a Kenyan. We met Kenyan lecturers, about 10 of them. So they are going on with their own businesses, but they say that it was really bad during when the peak of the tension. But they believe that normalcy is returning. What has happened, I'm told, some of the leaders who are in opposition have been incorporated in government, and it appears the rebels have taken, it's not as bad as we would imagine.
Right, and of course you got to speak to the External Affairs Minister?
Yes, I spoke to the External Affairs Minister,
all right,
Alain Nyamitwe. And what are some of the external issues at hand? One, some of the the international community and donors have pulled out of funding the government directly, so they are funding Burundians, through non-government organizations.
And maybe just hold that thought, because we actually have that clip of, when you're speaking to the External Affairs Minister, and perhaps you can listen into that at the moment.
We have said clearly that we do not appreciate what Rwanda has done in supporting rebel groups, in arming militias, in facilitating recruitments of youth from refugee camps, but only for the sake of having a very good relationship. If we have a friend or a neighbor who is not behaving very well, you may want to inform your friend or your neighbor that what he's doing is going to ruin your relationship.
The most important thing for Burundi or for whichever news channel that wants to talk about Burundi. Well, and even for Burundi themselves, the best thing for them is to look at whatever problems they are having as their own, rather than making it sound like it's a problem that originates from elsewhere.
Right, and so that is the External Relations Minister of Burundi, Alain Nyamitwe, and of course, Rwanda's President Paul Kagame. And just, there is tension and really a strained relationship with Burundi and its neighbors. Talk to us a bit about that.
Yeah, in particular with Rwanda, of course, you've heard the minister saying, yes, they are aware, or rather, they believe that Rwanda is sponsoring rebels to undermine the current regime and undermine Burundi. But you've heard the response there from President Kagame that though they should deal with their internal affairs and not make it look like it's external. So that's one of the issues at hand as far as international relations are concerned. But I believe the East African community and the Great Lakes region will come in and help resolve the issue. That's one. Second, of course, the UN asked how it can come in to help resolve the Burundi crisis. And the external minister said, yes, they are welcome to help boost the dialogue and also empower the youths. The other issue that is external is about now the forthcoming AU meeting in Kigali, of course, given the tension with Rwanda, the minister said they hope that Rwanda will provide the necessary security for its participants, and they are planning to push for the election of 3 commissioners, Burundians in the commissions in the AU.
Right, and even as we talk about that relations that Burundi is now having with the neighbors, would you say that as the East African community and really as the AU, that these blocs have done enough really to help to try and solve that crisis in Burundi?
Well, opinion is divided. There are those who say the East African leaders sided with the current regime. There are others who say, well, the court in Burundi had ruled that the President Pierre Nkurunziza can run for a 3rd term. So that is what under the bridge. So, but it really depends on the way forward now. There is, of course, the mediation talks that are led by former President of Tanzania, Benjamin Mkapa.
Right.
And we saw Kenya make an effort recently to organize a peace run in Bujumbura, which brought together Kenyans and Burundians. Although ambassadors from other 18 countries, there were at least 18 diplomats who participated in the peace run.
Did this take place when you were in
Yes,
Bujumbura?
we were still in Burundi and we covered it. Yeah, maybe we could run the clip.
Right, and there's actually that clip of Kenya's ambassador to Burundi. Perhaps you can listen into that at the moment.
Beginning of dialogue is respect for each other. Warundi mupendane, uwe Mtusi, uwe Mtwa. Nilisikia ingine si inaitwa nini? Na haiko ingine wale Watusi ambao Waganwa. Nilisikia Arusha juzi iko ingine wanaitwa Waganwa. Uwe Mtwa, uwe Mganwa, uwe Mtusi, uwe Mhutu. Kitu ya kwanza ni Urundi. Mimi ni Murundi. Na mkiwa wote Warundi, mkiangaliana kama Warundi, uwe mweusi, uwe mweupe, uwe mrefu, uwe mfupi, hiyo ni ya kwanza. Mheshimiane.
Sisi kama Jumuiya ya Afrika Mashariki tupo katika mtangamano, na tulianza na umoja wa forodha. Sasa tupo katika soko la pamoja, na hivyo vyote utekelezaji wake, na hatuwezi kufanikisha malengo yetu katika hayo ya biashara, ya ustawi wa jamii na maendeleo ya kila nchi na kila mtu kama hakuna amani.
So, the EAC is speaking about its role in this whole affair in Burundi.
Yeah, that was to try and show Burundians that they are together with them, and that the trade within the region really depends on peace across the region. Should there be turmoil in one country, then it impacts very negatively on integration. And of course, for Kenya, the ambassador, Ken Vitisia, was saying, Burundi is the gateway to the Great Lakes region. You know, like there is a growing market in DRC, and to go through DRC, especially Eastern DRC, he said Kenya needs a peaceful Burundi. Tanzania was saying they need a peaceful Burundi, and the whole aspect of integration. So without peace, and then all that would come to naught.
Right.
And of course, we have details coming on the Chamada report this Sunday at 8:30
Right.
p.m.
Right, and before I let you go, maybe lastly, speaking to these officials who are representative to Burundi from Kenya and Tanzania, and also just speaking to officials from Burundi itself, can we say an end? Did you get a sense that there's an end in sight, you know, for that strife in Burundi?
Well, all that depends on
in terms of, you know, the diplomatic kind of engagements to help them resolve this.
A very difficult question, which I don't know whether to say yes or no, but just to say that there is a presence of the international missions now, and they seem to now, that's like a show of confidence. Although, as I had said earlier, that some donors are now withdrawing, supporting the government directly, but through non-government organizations. But the key here, Sharon, is this, that the current regime has promised that the way forward is to strengthen institutions and abide by the initial Arusha Accord, you know, that ushered in the first democratic process, and to ensure Burundians that this will not happen again. That is what under bridge, but will there be democratic institutions? Will there be free elections? And most important, what the international community is concerned about is freedom of expression and respect for human rights. Probably should the current regime really streamline all those, and then we can say there is light at the end of the tunnel.
All right. Thank you very much, Alex. Thank you for making time to speak with us. And of course, we look forward to that comprehensive report on the Chamada report on Sunday.
Thank you.
Thank you. So right now, we want to take a short break here on Bottomline East Africa. Don't go too far. More news from across the region after the break. Right, let's now take a quick look at some of the events that took place across the region, and also what we can expect to take place next week on our Super World right here. And the week that was, we saw Kenya Supreme Court crisis, that dispute about the retirement age of judges. This is a hearing that is still taking place at the Supreme Court, and that IEBC standoff, and we've seen back and forth between CORD and Jubilee coalitions, both just giving their terms on how to have dialogue. Of course, CORD has been insisting that they want this to be an extra parliamentary process, Jubilee insisting that this has to take place in Parliament, so that continues. And also we saw you know, just coming to the country, Turkish president coming for a 4-day tour. I believe this happened last week. And if we can get the next board. Of course, we saw the budget reading for East African countries. This took place on Wednesday on all the 3 countries. Kenya's opposition protest over IEBC. Of course, we saw this did not happen on Monday, with that announcement made by Interior Cabinet Secretary banning a total ban of all demonstrations. And the Supreme Court crisis, we've already spoken about that it continues. And also earlier this week on Monday, we saw Somali president visiting the Dadaab camp. The first time a Somali president is to visit you know, that camp, and he also held bilateral talks with President Uhuru Kenyatta, agreeing, of course, President just remaining adamant that that camp needs to be closed, but agreeing on how that is going to happen, and also Somalia agreeing to lift the ban on miraa export to Somalia. And of course, we've spoken about the Supreme Court crisis. Maybe we can look at the week that is to come. Right, so next week we expect an ACP-EU joint parliamentary meeting to take place, and this we see is the African, Caribbean and Pacific nations just coming together to discuss the future of relations after the expiry of current trade agreements, and this is taking place in Namibia. So some of the things that are going to be taking place next week, and of course we shall be keeping a watch over this and bring you comprehensive details of this as they happen. And that's where we wrap up today's today's edition of Bottomline East Africa. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Sharon Momanyi. Up next is Friday Briefing. I see Betty Kialo is already in studio, very ready to bring you comprehensive news from the day. Have a lovely night.